Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's live edition. It's been a kind of a long summer. The first, not the first live episode since like July, but the first time that Carrie and I had both been here at the same time. We've had dueling vacations, not just us two, but also Walter, our producer. We've all gotten some very, I will humbly say, well deserved break. The news did not take a break though. And it's been
I'd
so
like to say,
action packed.
I'd like to say that I should probably go on vacation more often. I remember the last time I went on parental leave, and during the time that was last year, and during the time that I went on parental leave in like August, September, all of a sudden Republicans started collapsing in the polls before the midterms, and then the narrative completely shifted. When I left, it was like Democrats are doomed, and when I got back, it was like Republicans are doomed. And now here we are, and so I don't know. I feel like we should go on vacation more often because a lot of good news drops in that time.
Yeah, I'm not against going on vacation more often. I'm not gonna lie. I like the sound of that. But so much happened. We're gonna all talk about it today's episode. We're gonna be talking about Donald Trump and indictment, and then Donald Trump and another indictment. And are we done with Donald Trump indictments, or still there might be another one? Maybe Jack Smith might have one in New Hampshire because there's a Bedminster stolen document.
I don't
so there
want
might even be another.
I don't want to
underestimate.
Let's not sell Donald Trump short. You know what I'm saying, Marcos? Let's not.
A couple hundred accounts. He's got a couple more in his pocket. Yeah.
Yeah.
Greatest crooked president in history. He pulled it off. He did it. Congrats. We're going to talk about Ron DeSantis. We're going to talk about abortion and the Ohio ballot initiative. So much happening. And you know what the underlying theme or the overlying theme about this, Carrie, is? Remember, let's go back 2 years ago. So at this point in the 2022 midterm cycle, we were saying at that time, abortion is going to be a midterm issue, and democracy, the MAGA Donald Trump assault on our democracy, are going to be issues. And we were like way out on the limb. We didn't think so because it seemed really obvious. We were looking at the data. We were looking at the political reality. We weren't like pulling this out of our butt, right? Like we actually, we had an argument. And the counter argument at the time was, well, the economy, inflation is high. Joe Biden is unpopular, which are not bad counter arguments, right? And history, that was the argument, right? History. The party in power always loses the midterm election, except for in extraordinary circumstances. We didn't have those last year, and yet the Democrats were able to win that midterm election. So that theme, Carrie, not only has it not changed, but the abortion issue is supercharged. It's even more deeply ingrained in the electorate. And we just saw that in Ohio. We'll talk about that. The MAGA assault on democracy, holy crap. Like it was prevalent. It was present last year. Now it's not even like center stage. Now it's like elevated spotlights, fireworks in the background. Like it is. So we're going to have courtroom cameras with Donald Trump as a defendant. I mean, this is a whole nother level. Yeah. Inflation is under control. We have record low unemployment rates.
Looks like the soft landing. The soft landing might happen after 2 years of here comes the recession.
The recession, yeah.
Right.
And yeah, Joe Biden may still not be getting the credit that I think he deserves, and his numbers aren't bad. But now history is actually in our favor because the party in power in the White House usually retains power. The power of incumbency is massive, so much so that that Donald Trump almost won in 2020, despite Joe Biden's absolutely abysmal, despite Donald Trump's abysmal poll numbers at the time. Sure. Right? He was even so. We still have all these issues that led us to victory when history was against us. Now history is with us. The economy is with us. And those issues are even more in people's faces than before.
Sure.
I mean, so now I don't think we have to go out on a limb and say Democrats, if everybody does their work, we never take anything for granted. We never assume. We learned in 2016 the folly of being overconfident. But if everybody does the work that I'm pretty confident we will, because the stakes are so high, if we all do the work and we all and Democrats push the issues, and they understand very clearly that democracy and abortion are top of mind issues that trump everything else, no pun intended.
Sure.
Like, I don't think we're on a limb anymore saying like things are looking good for next year, and Republicans cannot quit those issues that are killing
Oh, goodness.
cannot quit
God,
Donald Trump.
unreal.
They cannot quit pushing for even more draconian abortion restrictions.
It's
Isn't that
unreal.
crazy?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I kind of like the way Simon Rosenberg always says, I'd rather be us than them. And I think that's just a good way of saying, like, we have a better, electoral position than they do right now. And I tell you what, I mean, what's interesting is, I mean, I think, I always watch Joe Biden's approval numbers. They're not moving much. They're stuck in civics. I watch civics tracking all the time. They're stuck he's right around 39, 40% approval, with like 50 something disapproval, 57, something like that. So, first of all, I doubt how much they'll change, maybe ever, right? We're so polarized at this point. I would be shocked if he ever got back to 45. And that has nothing to do with whether or not he's a good president.
Yeah.
If he hit 45, I would be like, we're winning the election. Like
We may have some rallying around the flag with some disaffected Democrats right now say that they don't, but there's a lot of contrarianism too, right? It's cool to be like, yeah, I don't like politicians.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember the civics number incorporates, there's a third option in the civics tracking, which is not sure. Yeah. So a lot of polls force people to choose, and they just say you either approve or disapprove. The people who are in the not sure category in civics are, most of them end up if they were forced to choose, would come down on the side of Joe Biden. I say that only because everyone who doesn't like Joe Biden isn't going to say they're not sure. They just absolutely,
right.
So,
yeah.
But one thing I have noticed, so I just wanted to point this out, which is, I listen to people who run campaigns and strategists all the time because I've never run a campaign. I've covered a lot of campaigns, presidential and otherwise. And so I have that perspective, and I bring that perspective with me. But one thing I always talk about is how much time it takes for a upswing in an economy or an upturn in an economy to sink in with the electorate. And really somewhere between the spring and summer of next year, people's feelings about the economy will probably be frozen in place almost, no matter what happens between then and the election, right? So you want to be in good position right around spring, certainly latest summer of next year. And sometimes, people have been in a position, like I listened to Joe Trippi the other day talk about campaigns where he was like, I just pray we have enough time for the economy, which is turning around, to sort of like the electorate to catch up with it. Right. And what we've got is a situation here where the economy is actually on the upswing in plenty of time for the electorate to catch on. And I am starting to see a change. So I just wanted to bring this up. I'll probably write about it in the next couple of weeks. In civics, they ask a question on the tracking poll: do you think President Biden is doing enough to create jobs? And right now, and then this is going to not sound great, but I'm telling you, the trend line is good. Right now, 41% say yes and 49% no. That 8-point differential is the closest that number has come together since I've been watching it. So it's been tracked since he signed the American Rescue Plan, or a little before that, since the beginning of his presidency. And it's the best it's ever been right now. 41% yes, he's doing enough to create jobs, 40% no. So those two lines are, they're converging, they're coming together. The yes is going up, the no is going down. And this is the best that question has ever tracked. So I think people are starting to catch on, and yeah.
So I will. What's really interesting about the whole economy thing, maybe not even interesting. What has been so remarkable about Democratic performance in 2022 and probably 2020, but 2022 was very stark, is that Republicans have always voted on abortion. Like, it was the thing, the Supreme Court abortion, and they didn't care. I mean, they so little cared about anything else that they supported Donald Trump, which, if you're a Christian conservative, Donald Trump is sort of the epitome of the most morally bankrupt, most disgusting human being possible. There's nothing. He doesn't even pretend to go to church.
Do you have to be Christian for that to be true? Or is it...
No. But you have to be religious right to suddenly not care about that.
I get it.
Right. Yeah, that's the hypocrisy. They've been crying about how Democrats are not pious enough. And then they get somebody who doesn't even pretend to care enough to learn how to properly cite a Bible verse, who doesn't even pretend to go through the motions of going to church. But then suddenly he's perfectly acceptable to them. And not only that, but they literally worship him. It's become a cult. They've been single issue voters. They didn't even care about anything else. Democrats were like, oh, Hillary's emails, liberals have been absolutely the worst because we're so intellectual, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and we'll be really, really fair. And Democrats have just been crying wolf on abortion. They always say that Republicans want to take it away, but the Supreme Court has said that we have that right, ignoring the fact that Republicans and courts have been chipping away at those rights for 50 years. Prior to the Dobbs decision that finally put an end to all of that. So suddenly, in 2022, you had a new generation of Democratic voters that didn't care that Joe Biden was unpopular, didn't care that the inflation was high or that the economy was shaky. All they cared about was abortion. We have finally reached that level. And what it means is that we have a much more polarized electorate. It's been more and more polarized, right? This idea that you're going to have a, Ronald Reagan style landslide election, or where, a candidate's going to win 49 states like that. That's history. It isn't going to happen anytime in a long time. We are polarized, but they were very polarized in a way that benefited only them. They were single issue. We were not single issue. Now, I don't think it matters in the macro picture whether the economy is doing well or not. People don't care. It's Donald Trump, our democracy, and abortion rights. What it does do, though, is on the margins, it takes away a headwind. So Democrats had a headwind. They had to argue, or I think they did the better things. They ignored it, right? They ignored talk about the economy in 2022. And we all remember the punditry being like, oh, Joe Biden really screwed up in his closing argument because he didn't talk about the economy. He only talked about democracy. And in fact, it turned out to be...
He didn't point out what everybody was considered to be our weakest, like our Achilles heel. He should have brought that up and talked about it more right at the end.
And now the economy is not an Achilles heel anymore. And to the point where when Republicans try to talk about that, now they're just making stuff up like, I remember $2 gasoline a year ago. No, there hasn't been $2 gasoline since like 1992 or 1989. It's been a long freaking time since $2 gas.
I keep wondering what the heck they're going to run on. I mean, they keep saying, well, I want to get back to the economy, which is getting better than it's ever been in decades. And then they say, and we want to run on immigration, and in immigrate, like illegal immigration, border crossings have plummeted under the new regime that the Biden administration put in place. So, like,
you want to know a secret? You want to know a secret, Carrie?
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah. Ron DeSantis showed us. They claim it's about social issues. They claim it's about woke. They got the candidate that literally did all those things. He did all the anti-woke things. He's a literal fascist, book banner, cruel to humans, right? To immigrants. He did everything they claimed to care about. He went to war against Disney because they were too woke, and he tanked because nobody gives a crap about that. No general electorate will ever give a crap about any of that. None of it makes any sense or is relevant to people's lives. But I think Ron DeSantis's collapse over the summer, we knew it was going to happen. We talked about it. I don't think we thought it was going to happen this fast.
No, it happened fast. Yeah.
It happened fast. And he didn't get his like day. Like usually candidates get their moment in the sun, right? Like he didn't even get that. He immediately tanked from day one. But it shows that they don't care about woke, because even Trump's not going around. Yeah, he'll talk about woke, but he doesn't talk about, that's not what he's running on. Donald Trump is running on me, and I, and it's the cult, right? And there's enough cultists in the Republican Party. Because remember, Donald Trump, his party, they didn't even have a party platform. There is no Trump ideology. There's no set of issues that Trump will ever run on. That's why I'll say things are better when I was president. America was great. Like there's nothing tangible he can point to and say, like, that's me. That's what I stand for. Because he only stands for himself. And that's pretty obvious. And so the Republicans and Fox News, and they all convinced themselves that their anti-woke thing was resonant. But it's not. Nobody cares. It doesn't make sense. And I think you've written about it. I've written about it. When people poll woke, it actually polls really well, because it's like, oh, you care about what other people's feelings are. That sounds nice to me. And so,
well, and
yeah.
also Republicans haven't been able to define it. They're not like what is woke? Well, I don't know. Woke is, it's
anything
bad.
I don't like.
It's bad, yeah. Right? It's anything I don't know. I mean, I don't like. It's anything that's even remotely I associate with Democrats. You know what I mean? Like that's it.
So
it's
what are they going to run on? I mean, Hunter Biden. They're going to try to keep pretending that that's a thing. I was just seeing yesterday, or maybe it was today. We're recording this on Tuesday. I was just seeing that some Republicans were saying they were even going to skip an impeachment inquiry and just go straight to the vote, because they can't even argue it, right?
No.
So they know they can't actually make a case. There's a very real chance House Republicans will just have a vote to impeach. So Trump, so they can say Biden was impeached.
Here's what I got to say, and I wrote this. We'll see you at the ballot box in 2024.
Seriously.
If you want to go ahead and impeach and have zero evidence and have just a total sham. I mean, the electorate doesn't like impeachments. Nancy Pelosi avoided for the longest possible time impeaching Trump because she knew that electorally it wasn't great. It could be disastrous. I mean, ask Newt Gingrich how well that went for him back in the 90s, right? So, she really tried to avoid it until finally, like, there was that recording of him, extorting Ukrainian President Zelensky for, over trying,
a Hunter Biden investigation.
Over Hunter Biden investigation.
I mean,
right?
This is the same story,
right?
For how many years now?
Exactly. So, and then, obviously, and then January 6th played out across America live on, on TV screens. And so she had to, there was no choice. You had to impeach. Otherwise, it was like, sure, anyone can just, the president can just orchestrate a coup anytime they don't like the results of an election, and, you get off scot-free. But so, I mean, it is, it's sort of stunning. I mean, it's a stunning situation. They have almost nothing to run on, and
not even almost. I wouldn't even qualify that, because even immigration, which he claimed that Biden's immigration plan would create a flood of new immigrants. We actually have one of the lowest levels of border crossings that we've had in decades.
Yeah.
And you know what he did? You know what Biden did, which was so simple? He allowed people to apply for asylum in their home countries. So
online. People
don't want to work with coyotes to get them across the border. People die. They get raped. They get, it's horrible. It's a horrible experience. If you can do that in your home country, of course you're going to do that.
Question: Do you know where because there is a lawsuit against that? Do you know where that stands? Someone's suing the. I mean, a judge may have temporarily blocked that program, which was working. And I wonder where it stands. I'm not sure exactly where it stands, but in any case, but
that's what good policy is, as opposed to you have Greg Abbott putting razor wire on
in the Rio Grande,
in the Rio Grande, which you're gonna have floods here in rainy season, and that stuff is gonna wash down the river, and it's gonna non-immigrants are gonna get caught up in it, and wildlife, and I mean, they're horrible people, and they think cruelty is policy. And quite frankly, obviously there's an audience for cruelty because Ron DeSantis is president and people support the Republican Party. I mean, he's governor,
Yeah,
but
right.
it is a limited amount of support, and they can't escape their bubble, and they think that people like this woke stuff, right? I mean, they convince themselves because they get all riled up over it. They can't define it, like you say, but they're riled up about it. And they just keep getting further and further away. And here's where this is important, because obviously there's one swing constituency, and that's college educated suburban voters, mostly white, mostly female. But I actually seen hints at even white college educated men in suburbia starting to like be like, oh, I don't want to be associated with the likes of like Nick Fuentes, you know, these
Yeah.
disgusting incel anti-women.
It reminds me of a friend of mine in a purple state when we were coming out of COVID, and one of her friends said, well, or she said to one of her friends, they were going to a public event, and she said, well, should we wear our masks? And the woman said, yes, of course. We don't want anyone to think we're Trumpers.
No, it is. Yeah, it's a lot easier back then. That was a good way to differentiate. Like, I hope they all wear their MAGA hats. Like, you know, I need to know who you are so I can stay away. But it's they are doing everything possible to further alienate. I mean, we're seeing that with the abortion issue. We saw that in Ohio, where the effort to basically destroy the ballot initiative process failed by what was the final margin? 9
Oh
points?
God, it was like 14 points or
Oh
something.
no, 14
like
points.
that.
Yeah,
it
wasn't
was
even
14
close.
points
For a state that Donald Trump won by 8 points. So we're talking a massive shift.
Just to back up, of course, this is we just want to let people know in Ohio, right, which Donald Trump won by 8 points in 2020. And there was this proxy vote in August. I'm sure most people followed it.
Hey, wait, hold on. Even more backstory. There is a abortion rights amendment in Ohio in November.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's why I was going to say
it's already on the ballot.
Already on the ballot. That's why this was a proxy vote. It was a proxy vote to try and make it harder to pass that abortion rights amendment that is going to enshrine abortion protections in Ohio's constitution in November, right? And so Republicans scheduled this this vote on trying to raise the threshold by which you can pass something and enshrine it in the Constitution at the ballot box.
Middle of summer. Yeah, middle of summer.
Right, middle of summer, a sleepy August. There's going to be low turnout. I mean, what's really interesting to me here is that Republicans still haven't figured out that they have slowly but surely been just losing the suburbs, right? And even in Ohio, like the thing about planning these ballot measures or any vote where you think it's going to happen at a low turnout time for Democrats, which it used to be a real problem for us. Well, now suburban voters are largely voting with Democrats. And even if they're not always voting for Democrats, they're voting with Democrats on ballot issues, right? So like in Ohio, there were people who went to the poll and polls in August and turned back this effort to stymie this November ballot measure, because even if they still kind of vote for Republican candidates in Ohio, they still believe that they don't want to curtail their rights as citizens to bring ballot measures. And suburban women especially are deeply committed to keeping access to abortion prevalent in the state. So Republicans are planning, a vote at a time that they think it's going to be a sleepy August, vote. And instead they have this wild 3 million voter turnout, which that is, off the charts in terms of anything they've seen before.
Yeah, the Republican Secretary of State was originally the guy who put it on, the Republican Secretary of State who's running against Sherrod Brown for Senate next year.
Originally
estimated about 1 million people would vote, and 3 million did.
Yeah, he underestimated just a touch. So, they're in a lot of trouble. I mean, and this matters not only because they lost this and it continues to show the salience of this issue, even in red states like Ohio, but Sherrod Brown is getting him reelected. He's a Democratic senator in a red state, and getting him reelected is extremely important.
One of the most liberal Democratic
One of the
senators.
most liberal.
in
But
a 8-point Trump state.
right. So, so that, it's unclear. We don't know who his challenger is going to be yet because they haven't had the Republican primary. Frank LaRose is one of the top people. Now he's searching for an issue because he was a big champion of this ballot measure and it went down in
He's
flames.
still talking about it. He's
I
still
know.
saying he hasn't let go about the abortion stuff. So here's why this is so critically stupid for Republicans and what a huge opportunity for Democrats. Ohio's a great example. Sherrod Brown has his incredibly difficult reelection campaign next year. We just mentioned that. If Republicans were smart, they would look at the numbers and they go like, yeah, this abortion issue isn't really playing for us. Now we can't now like change our minds about abortion, but we can just like shut up about it. Like they can even make the argument, let the people vote.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And just kind of like stay above the fray. Like they would have had this summer ballot initiative. But what they did is we just spent 3 months in Ohio branding Republicans as the reactionary, anti-woman, anti-choice, anti-liberty party. Now we get to do it again in November. So we're going to spend another 2-3 months, from here on to November to make sure that this amendment passes again. And they're fighting it instead of just like backing off and saying like, all right, okay, we lost. They are doubling down and pushing hard. So now you've just spent almost, big chunk of 2023 branding Republicans as a party, the anti-choice, the reactionary, anti-liberty party. Now, Sherrod Brown can spend next year basically riding that wave, that wave, and saying, I'm not one of those. And I will make sure, because all these Republicans are saying they want to pass the same law, but they want to do it in Washington, D.C., and they want to bypass all of us. They want to impose that. And I will be a bulwark against that. And not only will that work for Sherrod Brown, but Ohio itself, I'm not going to say it's going to be competitive at the presidential level, but
No,
8
probably
points is not a big swing. I mean, we're talking about a 4 or 5 point swing in our direction, and it's a different ball game. And so you're starting to chip away, and you have all those suburban voters in Ohio have lagged, in the Cincinnati and Cleveland suburbs have been pretty red. They have lagged, like in Wisconsin. They haven't swung as hard towards the Democrats as we've seen in Georgia, as we've seen in Arizona and other states,
Michigan,
Colorado.
and Pennsylvania. Michigan. Yeah.
And so again, you're just spending 6 months branding your Republican, branding yourself as extremist and opposed to things that you believe in. They are creating those single issue voters. And it is incredibly difficult for people to change a partisan affiliation. I mean, people, their political belief is like a limb. There's psychological studies that changing your party is like having your arm ripped off. It physically hurts to say like, I was wrong my entire life. I was a Republican. Now I'm a Democrat, because it's like my whole life has been a lie, right? I mean, people don't do that. It's safer to be like, oh, that's just an anomaly, or maybe this time I'll vote for a Democrat, but I'll still. And what Republicans are doing is that they're overcoming that physical pain of changing parties by providing real pain, like tangible pain that affects people's lives.
Let me just throw out one more thing, and then I think we should just real quick hit the we got to real quick just hit where we think the because we already talked about DeSantis a little bit, but where we think the GOP nomination is, and then I definitely want to let's end on a high note of 2 indictments that have dropped, criminal indictments that have dropped against Trump since we last were on here live together. But in Ohio, I just want to bring one other thing up, because this is something that's not just true to Ohio, but it's true about how the abortion issue is starting to break up the Republican coalition, which is after they lost. There was a whole lot of, after the Republicans lost this ballot measure in August, or this vote in August, there was a whole lot of finger pointing, right? It was like Yosemite Sam, like,
right.
it was you, but it was, what was interesting was the, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, sent out a, within like minutes of losing, of the thing being called, sent out this really pissy statement where it was like, well, this is unfortunate. And, we lament the fact that, I mean, they didn't use the word lament, but they're just paraphrasing the fact that, Republican politicians, some Republican politicians here weren't out front enough about this vote, and the business community wasn't on board with it. Okay, so I just have to say, first of all, they just lost the vote because their position stinks, right? It's unpopular. Okay, so just take a look in the mirror, right? But like Ohio Governor DeWine, who's a Republican, he was on record. I mean, the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, his whole,
he drove it.
His whole identity is about this. I mean, there are a lot of people, there were a lot of Republicans who came out and supported the measure in order to try and reduce, it was really a fascist measure. It wasn't just about abortion. It was a fascist measure that was going to make it harder for the citizens of Ohio to amend their own constitution, right? And give way more power to the state legislature. But what was interesting is that they pointed out the business community, which a lot of businesses, there's like five or six main big businesses that drive most of the revenues in Ohio. And 3 of them sat on the sidelines. They didn't want any piece of this. And, I think the Chamber of Commerce didn't come out in support of it and whatever. So what you are seeing is the fracturing of a coalition that used to hang okay together because their policy aspirations didn't necessarily conflict with each other, even if they weren't necessarily totally on board with the aspirations of the other, right?
Well, so nobody thought abortion was going to be outlawed.
Right, exactly.
So it was easy to pretend that it didn't matter.
It was easy, right? It was easy for the business community to sort of, back the pro-life community and the pro-life community to back the business community. That is not going to work going forward for Republicans. And that is a coalition. That was a fundamental part of their coalition, is that they had both the business community and pro-lifers in tow. And the business community was a ton of money, right? And the pro-life community was a ton of evangelical voters. So it was
both on the ground. And not the voters, money, but the actual knocking on doors.
Knocking on doors. So this is a disaster in terms of it splitting this coalition and fracturing this coalition. And it's not going to get any better for the Republican Party going forward.
And actually, that's a good segue to Ron DeSantis, because this week he's crying uncle with his battle against Disney.
The war on woke Disney. You know what? He's just moved on, quote unquote. That's what he told CNBC. We've just moved on. Really? And I thought this was like the war on woke Disney. Weren't they horrible? And you had to take them down, Ron?
Yeah, he was asking them to drop the lawsuits against the state.
He's trying
because he's personally moved on.
Yeah, right. He's trying to wriggle out of this lawsuit because he's getting taken to the cleaners. He's been outmaneuvered by Disney. But let's not. I mean, we could spend a lot of time on this, but let me just give you where I think we are in the race. Okay. It's not going to surprise anyone that Donald Trump is totally dominating. He's up over DeSantis by nearly 40 points in the national aggregate, right? Mm-hmm. He has consolidated the vote in Iowa, where DeSantis has gone down. He's consolidated the vote in New Hampshire, where DeSantis has gone down. Chris Christie's come up a little bit in New Hampshire. In some polls, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina has come up a little bit in New Hampshire. And in some polls, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina has come up a little bit in Iowa too. But basically, like, no one right now is, while DeSantis is on the decline, no one has been able to sort of step into the void yet. And it's possible. It is highly improbable, but still possible that maybe someone like Tim Scott catches fire at the last second with evangelicals. I mean, Pence is out. Pence is now, full on. I mean, somewhat to his credit, not calling him a hero, just calling out, Trump for asking him to violate the Constitution, saying he shouldn't be a president. Anyone who asks for his personal needs to be, put above the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks for getting there very late to the game, Pence. But, Pence is out. DeSantis, it's hard to see, some people have said, well, this is kind of where John McCain was. He dropped to single digits before he staged his comeback in 2008.
People like John McCain.
I know, and John McCain liked people. I mean, John McCain I was listening to an old staffer, and John McCain cut his staffing down to nothing, drove around in like, I think, an old beater or something, rental car, and like stayed in slimy hotels and motels at the cheapest possible rates. And the guy was like, even I thought it was a little gross. Like, I didn't want to stay at these places in my 20s. You know what I mean? And John McCain would just wake up in the morning and be like, this is great. Let's get out and see some people. Mm-hmm. So like, that's not going to happen. Anyway, I really do think DeSantis is toast. I think there is a small window of opportunity for someone like Senator Tim Scott to potentially overperform in Iowa. And then maybe it disrupts Trump a little bit. But let's just be clear about one thing before we move on to indictment territory, that even if Trump is consolidating the vote in the Republican primary, it's not because of his strength. It's because of the weakness of the field.
Yes.
And he is not a better general election candidate than he was. He's still a terrible general election candidate. It doesn't mean it's an easy win. I'm just saying that he is not a strong candidate. He's a weak candidate that is benefiting from the fact that they have just a talent deprivation on the Republican side right now.
So to that point, there's a phenomenon in presidential primary politics that we can go way back, where generally speaking, in a truly competitive primary, multiple candidates get their moment in the sun, right? They'll peak in the polls because everybody's giving them a good look. Howard Dean, Wesley Clark, Elizabeth Warren. On the Republican side, like even
Ted Cruz had a moment, and Marco Rubio had a moment, and I'm just thinking about
So what happens in those moments is that the rest of the field collectively trains their guns on that front runner and takes them down. And usually there's somebody who does a kamikaze run, kind of like what Chris Christie's trying to attempt right now. But it's the collective pile on, and it is incredibly hard. And I would argue, even for Donald Trump, if you're seeing this in Georgia with a lot of Republicans, including Brian Kemp, the governor, saying like, yeah, we ran a good election and Donald Trump tried to steal it. And I'm a Republican and I'm saying that, right? But they're lonely voices right now. If there was a collective pile on, and it doesn't even have to be the broader party establishment, if it was those Republicans in the field that are not Trump, if they all of them, there's like 8 of them. Yeah. If they all collectively trained their guns with
technically more than that, but yeah.
With a relatively unified message, and you don't have to coordinate. It's easy, right? Like, he's multiple indicted. Do we really want to go into a general election with somebody who's facing jail time? It's not a hard message. If they did that, I promise you, it would bleed Trump's support, because they require, especially conservatives, right? It's a machine, and they're a bubble, and you pierce that bubble, and if you have a loud enough counter voice, people will start to second guess, or at least start like, oh yeah, if he is facing jail time, how's he going to be president? And so that is the particular weakness. It's not even that the candidates are weak, and but if they all piled on, it would actually have an impact. And it is amazing to me that they claim to be running for president, but other than Chris Christie and a little bit of recent Mike Pence, they are afraid to criticize their front runner.
DeSantis is inching towards it. He's actually made a little bit of a change, and he admitted finally that Trump lost the election, and that President Biden was a legitimate. And you're just going to watch him tank in the polls, because nobody likes him anyways. They've all decided that. You see that one.
It was out of weakness. Had he came out of the gate.
Oh, I agree. 100%.
Oh, I know. I'm not arguing with you, but it's just, it's, at this point, you change your message. It's weakness. It's already like, weakness. What changed?
Especially when you're like, when your trajectory in the polls is like this, everything you do is going to be seen as weakness. It's desperation. So yeah, I agree. So let's talk about a front runner who might end up running his campaign from jail.
It's a very happy thought. I'm not gonna lie. And it's the federal case. There's multiple indictments. They all look pretty good. Everything looks pretty solid. But that Georgia one, that RICO charge, which is actually shockingly easy to prove. They need to prove 2 criminal acts, and they have a list of like 100 of them, and it's just like pick, like like a menu, like pick whichever 2 criminal acts you want. It's got a 5-year mandatory sentence,
Right.
minimum mandatory sentence, and there's some question about whether you can substitute it with parole. The DA in the case said you cannot, and nobody would serve full 5. Trump wouldn't serve a full 5 years. Good behavior, he'd be out in 6 months or something, right? But he may actually be in jail. I mean, it may actually happen.
Well, so the legal experts that I've kind of been listening to, who are much smarter about. I mean, I don't pretend to really know, have an idea here, but. Yes. Oh, right. Okay. So one thing I want to add is I just thought of this. August 23rd is the Republican debate. Come to dailykos.com. We will be covering it. So anyway, so that's just back on the Republican debate. It's going to be fun. Okay. August 23rd, mark your calendar. So anyway, this situation, it seems like maybe because there's so many people in this RICO indictment, people are sort of doubting whether or not Fani Willis is going to be, even with her sort of aggressive 6-month timeline, if she's going to be able to get it in before the 2024 election. But people believe that there is a real possibility that the Jack Smith, the special counsel indictment for conspiracy to overturn the election, the federal indictment, that because he's solely focused on Donald Trump, may be able to get done before the election. So what's interesting is that I honestly think that, and I didn't come by this myself. This is something that I got just from tooling around, and I saw Simon Rosenberg mention it, and then I just sort of was looking around. There could be so many more indictments that stem from what happened in Georgia. She mentioned, like, without necessarily, including anyone or naming, anyone. She mentioned the efforts in New Mexico, in Nevada, in Arizona, where the Attorney General has just opened a investigation. In Michigan, where Dana Nessel, the Attorney General there, has already charged 16 people in the fake elector scheme. In Pennsylvania, so there could be months, even after the election, and even after that RICO case comes before the courts, there could be months to years of criminal cases that spin off of it, that continue to come. And I honestly think that we should view the Republican response to it. I mean, Ronna McDaniel admitted in her January 6th testimony that she had been contacted by Team Trump to put together or assemble a group of fake electors. I mean, they didn't call them fake electors, but alternate electors. And she tried to explain it by saying, hey, I just thought they were, contingency planning if it turned out that, it wasn't called for Biden or something like that. But there's so many people that are potentially implicated. I bet you there's a ton of Republicans going to bed every night, thinking, oh my God, I hope this doesn't get to me.
Lindsey Graham.
Well, yeah, Ginny Thomas, Lindsey Graham. I mean, Lindsey Graham wasn't named in Fani Willis's indictment, the Fulton County DA, but it's exactly that type of person who he could, you never know, and he was the one who was saying today or yesterday, I think last night, about the indictment. Oh, this is coming from liberal jurisdictions. The liberal jurisdiction of the United States of America? Is that, it's like, what are you talking about? This is the federal government.
Every single witness and every single federal DA working on this case has been a Republican or Republican appointed. There's not a single Democrat. Now here in the Fulton County, okay, finally, there's one Democrat involved.
Well, that's what he's trying to. Yeah, he's trying to say, he's trying to like paint it all as. Yeah.
But every single witness has been a Republican, and they have all been Trump associates. So it is positive. It's absolutely. I mean, in the grand jury on Monday in Fulton County, one of the witnesses that testified before the grand jury was a former lieutenant governor, a Republican. I mean,
Right.
who's been very, very clear about how pissed off he is at Trump for trying to subvert democracy in his state.
Sure.
So it is. I mean, they're going to say it because, of course, they got nothing else. And they've decided that they're not going to actually distance themselves. I mean, because they could easily say, like, yeah, we don't stand for subverting democracy. We believe in the right of people's vote, and let the court, let the legal system determine whether Trump was guilty or not. That's the easy answer. You distance yourself from that. They can't do it, which leads us to, since we're running out of time, the overarching theme from the beginning, right? Abortion and our assault on democracy, and Republicans' inability to distance themselves from that. And that is going to be the theme over the next year as we move closer and closer to that presidential election. It's going to give us a lot of opportunities. I think we're favored to win the House. We may actually hold the Senate. I mean, given these dynamics. And there is a scenario where we actually upgrade the Senate because we lose Kristen Sinema, but we get Ruben Gallego. We hold everything. We may actually have the votes to
have a better majority, not a bigger majority, but a better majority than we had. That's possible. I mean, that is a tough road to hoe. It's much easier to see our path to the House, and it's much easier to make an argument about the path to the White House, hanging on to the White House. The Senate is definitely going to be challenging, but it's possible that this Republican Party could once again do what people used to fear about Democrats, which is steal defeat from the jaws of victory. I mean, that's what people used to say about Democrats all the time. Well, the Senate has done that. Senate Republicans have done that for the last 2 cycles.
Yep, absolutely. So that is going to be our show, but everybody sort of says like, oh, don't say that we're going to win because people get complacent. You want to not get complacent? Think about the Senate. Think about all those races in critical states, because we're mostly playing defense in Ohio, in Montana, in West Virginia. Yeah, even West Virginia, in Arizona. We are playing defense in some incredibly difficult states. And the only 2 offensive opportunities that are, within the realm of possibility are Texas and Florida, and Texas and Florida are particularly great opportunities, but we can create those opportunities. And this is going to be our jobs as activists and as people that are fighting this fight. Is there's no way we can be complacent. We remember 2016. We know how we thought it would be easy to beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump will never be easy to beat. It's a cult, and there's no logic or reason to people. We can't understand why people cling to him so hard. It's just, I think it's beyond, because it's a cult. I don't understand why anybody would support a cult leader. That's what they have become. So we can never underestimate the power of that cult. We're going to fight hard. And I know all of us, 2020 is still, or 2016 is still too soon. Like, we'll never get over 2016. Nobody wants to feel the way we felt November election night, 2016. It was the worst. It was the worst. And so we got that. We can maximize our gains in the House. We can hold the Senate. And if we fight hard enough, and if we get some breaks, and if Ted Cruz is as much of an a-hole as he always is and alienates so many people, we may have an opportunity there.
Colin Allred the Democrat running for the Senate seat, running against Cruz. I don't know. We're probably going to have a primary there, but man, he's a good candidate. He's a good candidate. So
we're gonna have to fight hard. And of course, we want to win the presidential with as much of a margin that there's out of the margin of them trying to do shenanigans, because they still have a bigger Supreme Court majority. Yep.
Can I add one final
point,
which I think is really interesting, which is we've been talking about how we should be excited about the opportunity to smash the MAGA movement to smithereens, right? Just like give them such a drubbing, give the Republicans such a drubbing that they actually have to, switch course. I feel like we could do it at the ballot box in 2024, and at the same time, something like this, really widespread RICO prosecution and other criminal indictments that stem from it might actually be a chance to cleanse the Republican Party a little bit and rid it of some of its MAGA-ism, from both an electoral standpoint and a legal standpoint, a criminal standpoint. So, it's like those 2 things working together might finally start to break up this ridiculous cult that is threatening our country.
Yep. And, a lot of people lost their abortion rights. I don't think anybody's feeling complacent about that. I don't
Yeah.
get the sense that people are like, eh. And so I'm not too worried about us being complacent. I'm excited about us fighting hard to win next year. So as I said, a couple of weeks ago when I did the show, now's a fun time. Like get the popcorn, enjoy the spectacle that is the Republican shit show, because there's never been anything like it. And it is a historical moment for us to sort of enjoy it. But this is also an opportunity for us to rest and recharge, because the fight's coming and we're going to be ready for that. And they're going to eventually come together. They're going to rally around, they're going to close ranks, and it'll be on. So I'm excited for us to get there, but for now, let's enjoy this, because this is so much fun. So Carrie, thank you so much. Glad we got the team back together. Walter as well. We're all finally back from our vacations, summer vacations. Thank to you, the reader, viewer, listener, everybody who's working with us with Daily Kos to be part of this movement for our democracy. Couldn't do it without you. Glad to have you guys as fellow travelers. This is a historic opportunity for us to deliver that crushing blow to MAGA, and I'm really excited about that challenge ahead this next year. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here today, for listening to us, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.